Hello, this is Miss Kyler, and I'm here to talk to you today about plot and point of view. I'm going to specifically look at the story of An Hour, The Storm, and The Lottery, because each of those stories are a little bit different in the way they use point of view. So there are different ways to look at plot. You see a lot of different descriptions and pictures in your textbook and even in the Blackboard course. But the basic depiction of plot is always going to be triangular, with the rising action mimicking the rise in tension, going to the climax, the peak of the action, but also that's where the protagonist makes their decision and they take the decisive action or they have an epiphany. And then whatever follows is whatever falls out, the cause and effect, the effect of whatever, the result of whatever happened at the climax. Here's a good depiction. I like this because it has the idea of about the original status quo and then the new status quo. The original status quo is what the characters are like, and the beginning of the story, and the new status quo is how have they changed based on all the stuff that happened in between, the decisions they made, the epiphanies they've had. And also I like the way this depicts that after the climax, after you make that decisive action, you either win or you lose the prize. You either win out or you lose. So some of that is open to interpretation. We can say that some characters, you can say that they win some things, but they've lost other things in the events of the story. But overall, our whole point of a short story is that somehow or other that protagonist has changed. Okay? Even in A&P, Sammy started out, he seemed like he was pretty confident, he knew what he needed to do, he had a job. At the end, he's not as confident. He's realizing that life is a lot bigger and a lot harder than he imagined. So he's changed. It seems like a small little step for us, the readers, but to Sammy it's a huge step. So the plot of the story, these are some of the important points of the plot. The catalyst, that's the event that sets the plot in motion. Conflict is what hinders the main character from achieving his or her goals. Remember, conflict, the definition is antagonist versus protagonist. And that antagonist is usually not another human being. An antagonist is most likely the character's own thoughts and feelings or what they feel society thinks they should be doing. So it's either, most of the time, it's going to be protagonist versus him or herself, or the protagonist versus society. Sometimes it's even protagonist versus nature. So very rarely is it going to be another character that's causing the conflict. Climax is a point where the main character makes a decision, takes decisive action, has an epiphany. At this point, there's no turning back. And so it's going to be up to us to determine, do we think the character won or did they lose? Does the main character win the prize, which means they can gain or knowledge or success? Or does the main character lose the prize? Is success snatched from them, or do they just give up? So the plot of A Story of An Hour. Just to take a little look at that. The catalyst of the story is that Mrs. Mallard learns that her husband has been reported as killed in a train crash. The conflict, Mrs. Mallard fights against her feelings of relief at being free. Now, you can also say that she's also fighting against what society tells her she should be feeling, right? The society says that as a good little housewife, you should be mourning instead of feeling relief. And then the climax, she is a goddess of victory at the top of the stairs, and she's determined to have a full, happy life of being free and independent. She's come to terms with that sense of being free. Now the question, did she win or did she lose? Well, she has won the battle with herself. She's come out a goddess of victory. But there's some kind of little thing going on here with fate, where fate just snatches that away from her because, well, her husband wasn't really dead in the first place, right? So that kind of changes things for her. So in the end, we can say she loses because she had all of those hopes snatched away from her. In The Storm, the catalyst is that Calixta is home alone as a storm is brewing. Her husband decided to go to the store, but there happens to be a storm coming. That storm's causing a lot of problems. Which also, who blows in but I'll say? So the conflict is Calixta must struggle between being faithful to her husband. Again, that's what society tells her she's supposed to be. She's supposed to be a good, faithful housewife. But she's also struggling with giving in to her passions. So herself, everything that's in her is saying, oh no, you're in love with Alcée. Give in to him. And at the climax, Calixta makes love with Alcée. Okay, they consummate their love affair. And the question is, win or lose. At the end it says, and the storm passed and everyone was happy. So it seems like she's won out over society and that frowns on adultery. But you can also say, well, what's going to happen in the future? We could interpret the idea that maybe in the future someone's going to have to pay the price for their sin, because we've been trained to look at stories that way, that if you do wrong, if you go against what society says, then you're going to have to pay the price. Okay, now the plot of the lottery, the catalyst is that it is a time for the village's ritual lottery. And we see them starting to gather the stones, and we start questioning, why is everybody being so solemn and serious when a lottery is supposed to be a fun, exciting, good thing in our minds? People can win and get a lot of good things out of that. The conflict, it's kind of the town against the lottery, town versus lottery. The town does not know why it has this lottery, does not like the lottery, yet for some reason it is compelled by tradition to continue with the lottery, never asking why. You keep hoping that maybe someone will step up and start questioning why. At the climax, Mrs. Hutchinson, who's been hoping and trying to wheedle her way out of it as much as she can, she actually wins the lottery. And then, so does she win or lose the prize? Well, by winning the lottery, she actually loses, as we see by the ending. So moving on to point of view. We're going to mainly look at third-person point of view in this lesson, because we've already talked about first-person point of view, but do be aware that with first-person point of view, you don't always know everything about the main character. A first-person narrator doesn't always bare his or her soul to the people he or she is talking to. Just like Sammy, there's a lot we didn't know about Sammy, but there's a lot that we did, because it's just as if he was talking to his very best friend, his confidant, but he's not going to bare everything to them. So, with point of view, there's that thing called psychic distance. How close does the character or the narrator get to the character's inner thoughts and feelings? Okay, so the psychic distance. How close the narrator comes to the protagonist's thoughts or feelings. Pretty interesting to watch that. So third-person omniscient, third-person limited, and third-person objective are the three types of point of view. The third-person omniscient narrator is someone who can see into all the character's thoughts or feelings. Third-person limited is kind of like right over the shoulder of the main character. They can see into the the protagonist's thoughts and feelings, and can see what that character is thinking about the other characters. And then there's third-person objective, where there's a fly on the wall sort of narrator that just stands there and observes and hears things but can't get into anybody's thoughts. It's kind of like if you could sneak up on someone and you were invisible and you could just stare at them and listen to what they're saying, but you would not know what they were thinking because you don't have your crystal ball with you. Okay? So the point of view in the story of An Hour is very interesting. For the majority of the story, it's third-person limited. But on the little fringes of the story, in the beginning at the end, it's actually, the psychic distance is pretty far from Mrs. Mallard. It starts out with Richard, so we know a little bit about what Richard and Josephine are thinking, and little by little we creep closer and closer to her psychically, especially after she goes into the room, she's all alone, and the narrator can sneak up to her and creep into her soul until at the point where we actually know more about her than she knows about herself. It's as if that camera just keeps getting closer and closer, zooming in, zooming in, zooming in, until we actually are right there deep inside her most forbidden desires. Now once she leaves the room, the goddess of victory, then we start creeping back away from her. We're no longer as close. And it's kind of like the narrator is helping us let go of her in an anticipation that and she's going to die. We're not going to be able to be in her thoughts and feelings anymore because she's dead at the end. So the very last line is very cold and aloof. It has that sense of death, hovering over the dead body. It is an objective narrator, and that when she's dead, and all that remains is a cold verdict of society. And they think that she dies from the joy that kills, when we know that she actually died from having her joy snatched away from her. Now, in the point of view in the storm, that's going to be third-person omniscient. And in that story, we jump from Bibi, this husband, to even the storm's point of view, and Calixta and to Alcée. So we're in and out of different people's thoughts and feelings. And it's interesting to note that we actually jump into Alcée's thoughts just as Alcée and Calixta are about to consummate their desire. It's kind of like the narrator has to be in the man's thoughts whenever the most strongest passions are being felt. It's interesting to question why the author chose to do that at that point. That's what I like about point of view. You can say, why did the author get into that person's thoughts at that moment? Or why are they outside of that character's thoughts at that moment? Now at the end, the psychic distance is very far from anyone's thoughts. It's as if the storm is leaving and carrying with him the knowledge of what it stirred up. And we know that storms don't stay away. Once the tensions are mounting again, there's going to be another storm. Will it be good? Will it be bad? Well, it's up to us to decide. So the point of view for the lottery is third-person objective. This is a perfect example of this type of point of view. If we had been in anybody's thoughts or feelings, if it had been third-person limited or third-person omniscient, we would have had anticipated the ending of this and why everybody's so tense about this lottery, and we would have known what would happen at the end, whereas the author really wanted that shock value at the end. But being stuck in this third-person objective narrative, we are forced to stand by as we watch and wonder why the villagers are so tense, and we are helpless to interfere on Mrs. Hutchinson's behalf. Perhaps the author wants us to sense this helplessness, to understand what it feels like to be caught up in this dystopian world where no one knows why or questions why anymore. So it gives us that sense that we cannot think, we cannot change what's happening because we have no connection to the characters in the story. We just have to sit back helplessly, just like the villagers are sitting back helplessly, not doing anything about it. So I hope you have enjoyed this lecture on plot and point of view. I hope it helps you understand these concepts better, so that you can apply this to your stories when you're analyzing them. Thanks very much. Bye.